As I know this statement is going to get a lot of people annoyed, I'm going to say it and run away. Harry Potter stole from Lord of the Rings. Okay, now you've had a chance to calm down, let's clear the air. When I say stole, I don't literally mean stole. I mean that Harry Potter either takes consciously or unconsciously from Lord of the Rings, or there are some striking similarities between the two. That is no surprise given the fact that Lord of the Rings is such an important part of pop culture and the fantasy genre, and has influenced a plethora of works since the novel's release. Therefore, it is no surprise that there are a few similarities between another huge franchise that is also a huge part of pop culture and the fantasy genre, Harry Potter. JK Rowling herself admitted she had read Lord of the Rings before writing Harry Potter, but said that any similarities were purely superficial. But are they? Well, let's take a look at 10 big similarities between the two franchises. Let's start off with a term coined by filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock, the MacGuffin. Now, the MacGuffin in cinema is an object, device, or event that is necessary to the plot and the motivation of the characters. Take the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, or the Infinity Gauntlet in Avengers, or even Grogu in The Mandalorian. Both Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter have MacGuffins that are central to their story, the One Ring and Horcruxes respectively. Now, because MacGuffins are so popular in cinema and fiction, it would be wrong to just associate Harry Potter copying Lord of the Rings on that alone. But it's the way they are both presented that leads us to scratch our chins and say, I've seen that before. The antagonists of both franchises, Sauron and Voldemort, put a piece of themselves inside a special trinket or object, with Voldemort even using jewelry for his Horcruxes. And it is the job of the protagonists to destroy these items to kill off the antagonist once and for all. Now, while Horcruxes are something that isn't mentioned until the Half-Blood Prince, Harry has been a Horcrux from the very beginning, and it's these MacGuffins that drive both series along. But the MacGuffins also exert their power over their hosts in a similar sort of fashion. We see a number of characters in Lord of the Rings become influenced by the power of the ring. Even the ring-bearer Frodo, as his behavior changes through the course of the movies, becomes paranoid, aggressive, and untrusting, especially to his best friend, Sam. In Deathly Hallows Part 2, Ron also becomes influenced by the Horcrux and becomes jealous of Harry due to his close friendship with Hermione and eventually leaves the trio, just like Sam leaves Frodo and Gollum. But more than this, there is a connection between the antagonist and the MacGuffin. Every time someone puts on the ring, Sauron or the Nazgul are alerted to their presence. Similarly, Voldemort has a connection with Harry, and the two can share thoughts, emotions, and even their location. That's why Harry has to master the art of occlumency to block out Voldemort's control. Also, Voldemort puts a taboo on his own name so that the moment it is uttered by anybody anywhere, his henchmen would be able to trace them. Meaning nowhere is safe in the presence of the bad boys, Sauron and Voldy. Another similarity comes in the form of the protagonists. And no, I'm not talking about appearance, although if you squint, Elijah Wood and Daniel Radcliffe do look kinda similar. Now, admittedly, the similarities between Frodo and Harry are relatively skin deep. A lot of characters take the position of protagonists who are assigned a deadly task and are the only ones who can complete it. Take Luke Skywalker, for example. Frodo and Harry have similar arcs themselves. Frodo has to travel to Mount Doom and throw the ring into its fire, while Harry must defeat one of the most powerful dark wizards of all time. In both series, the protagonists act as the chosen one, and the stakes are on that one person's shoulders. Although admittedly, Frodo is less tied to his fate, as he had many chances to turn back and wasn't Sauron's Horcrux as a baby. But just like the protagonists, the antagonists are also rather similar, perhaps even more so. Both are, to put it mildly, the personified version of evil and seek to assert complete dominance over the world and bring in a dark reign of terror. As we mentioned earlier, they both have their life forces attached to an object and have both cheated death, with their spirit remaining alive, albeit in a weakened state, as they seek to restore themselves to full strength. I mean, they even share the moniker the Dark Lord. That kinda says it all. Although, it has to be said that Sauron nearly took over the whole of Middle-earth, and Voldemort had trouble taking over a school. But the most striking similarity definitely comes in the shape of the mentor figure, with both series having a sage and wise old wizard with a long beard and pointy hat, Gandalf and Dumbledore. Gandalf actor Ian McKellen even joked that he thought he was in Harry Potter every time he saw Michael Gambon's image on a Harry Potter poster. Both Gandalf and Dumbledore are elusive, enigmatic, and sometimes even frustrating, but are also wise, caring, and crafty mentors and friends to the protagonists. They both exude grandeur, absolute power, and are also unafraid to crack a joke or a wise remark now and again. They also have no issues completely lambasting someone and making them feel 2 inches small. There is also another tangential link between the two characters, but that is something we will save for the end of the video. Dumbledore and Gandalf, and kind of Frodo and Harry, aren't the only ones who look alike. Take, for example, the Nazgul and Dementors. Both are black-cloaked, shadowy creatures that work for the bad guys. Nazgul are enslaved by the power of the ring and are the most terrifying lieutenants of the Dark Lord Sauron, trapped in the world between the living and the dead. The Dementors are also vile, wraith-like creatures that appear dark, hooded, and shadowy without any particular physical form. Both creatures strike fear in the hearts of their enemies, but in my opinion, the Nazgul are much more terrifying. You can't tell me you weren't on the edge of your seat as they hunted the hobbits in the Fellowship of the Ring. You can't. It's legally impossible. Both Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings delve into the world of fantasy in many ways, but one of the key portrayals is through their use of mythical species and creatures. Take, for example, elves, which exist in both worlds, although they are admittedly very different, not just looks-wise, but in personality. Instead, Rowling's house elves are more physically similar to another creature, Gollum. Both have large tennis ball-sized eyes, oversized ears, old wrinkled skin, and an overall scraggly appearance. Although admittedly, the similarities between Gollum and the house elves like Dobby definitely end there. In the fantasy genre, there is one overgrown creature used more than others, the giant spider. This, of course, includes both Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. In Lord of the Rings, we have the mighty arachnid Shelob, who will decimate anyone and anything, including orcs, that dares enter her lair. Harry Potter's version, Aragog, is slightly more likable as he is close friends with everyone's favorite groundskeeper, Hagrid. In retrospect, though, that isn't saying much, and Aragog did still set his large family on Harry and Ron so they could all have a tasty dinner. Not to mention the pincers. Rowling may not have taken direct inspiration from Lord of the Rings here and might have just gone with another animal that acts as a common human phobia like the basilisk, but the similarities are undeniable. Moving away from characters and creatures and back to the mythical objects, both Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter have mirrors with cool names that can relive the events of the past. In Lord of the Rings, the Mirror of Galadriel was a silver basin of water which belonged to the elf Galadriel. Instead of using it to wash her face, though, I assume she didn't use it to wash her face. The mirror could show whoever looks into it images of what they wanted to see, which in my case would be Daredevil Season 4. #Bring back Daredevil. In Harry Potter, there is also a mirror that shows you images you wish to see, such as Daredevil Season 4. And that is the mirror, or Erised, which, as you may or may not know, is the word desire backwards. As Dumbledore describes, the Mirror of Erised shows the viewer the deepest, most desperate desires of our hearts, which in Harry's case is his family, and in Ron's case is winning the Quidditch Cup. But there is another object that also reminds us of the Mirror of Galadriel, the Pensieve. The Pensieve is a metallic basin which looks somewhat similar to the Mirror of Galadriel and allows people to access their own memories. The Mirror of Galadriel also has a similar capability, with the mirror being used to grant the viewer things of the past, present, and possible future. Last but not least is probably the creepiest similarity that the franchises share: the ominous souls of the dead. In particular, we mean the dead Marshes in Lord of the Rings and the Inferi in Harry Potter. In Lord of the Rings, the dead Marshes are on the site of an ancient battlefield that was the backdrop for the Battle of Dagorlad, which took place during the War of the Last Alliance. The dead marshes were a section of the battlefield where the bodies were buried and, over time, turned to ominous marshland, with the bodies still seen floating in their watery graves. As Gollum leads Frodo and Sam to Mordor, Frodo falls in and is nearly pulled to the bottom by the dead until he is rescued by Gollum. This scene is reminiscent of the Inferi in Harry Potter. For anyone who needs a refresher, the Inferi were the undead that were bewitched by Voldemort to attack anyone who tried to take or destroy his Horcrux, which was hidden in an undisclosed cave. Harry comes into contact with them as he and Dumbledore try to uncover the Horcrux, and although they are supposed to just be projections, you can definitely see similarities between the two. And that's our lot. As we said before, we were being very cheeky when we said the word stole, and while there are certainly some similarities between the two, some of which may have been directly inspired by Lord of the Rings in Rowling's case, Tolkien's work is so vital in the world of fantasy and in general that it has inspired and influenced so many writers over the years. Going back to the Gandalf and Dumbledore story from earlier, it is probably not surprising to learn that Ian McKellen was actually offered the role of Dumbledore after the original actor, Richard Harris, passed away. But McKellen turned it down due to the fact that Harris wasn't a very big fan of McKellen, stating that he was a, quote, technically brilliant but passionless actor. McKellen did not want to replace an actor he knew disapproved of him, so instead the role went to the wonderful Michael Gambon. Makes you think though, doesn't it?